We're smiling, but there's not much to smile about. This is unprecedented. I'm talking about the United States Supreme Court and Donald Trump's not constitutional crisis, his war on the Constitution. Doormats get treated better than the U.S. Constitution by this particular president. We here on Unprecedented, on Legal AF, the best we can be with our audience are the foot soldiers to protect democracy and the Constitution. We've got a fast-moving story, the Judge Zinnis case down in Maryland, which is on it. It's going to be on a rocket ship fast track to the United States Supreme Court for the second time, involving, ostensibly it involves a person, Armando Abrego Garcia, but it's really about our rule of law, and it's really about higher ideals than that. And Judge Wilkinson, who's a lion of the Federalist movement and a conservative icon, had a withering yet soaring rhetoric opinion yesterday against the Trump administration. But we have the Trump administration's response to Judge Wilkinson, and it has to do with a hand and one certain finger in a posting by the White House on its official account. This is all, again, a attack on our co-equal branches of government and the Supreme Court in particular. And we're going to talk about how we think the Supreme Court is going to deal with it. As the Supreme Court decides to extend its session, because we're coming to what you and I said was going to happen is exactly happening. Right, Dina? The term that we're in starts the first Monday of October and usually runs to the end of April. But I said jokingly, half jokingly, cancel your summer vacations. With this administration, you're going to be on the emergency docket and shadow docket oral arguments all through the summer. And now we have one of the latest oral arguments has been scheduled I've ever heard of, which is the middle of May, about birthright citizenship, the executive order trying to destroy that from the Constitution, and the power of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions. All up, 10 a.m., May 15th. Come back here to Legal AF. We're going to be doing it live. And so we're going to talk about that birthright citizenship case as well to prepare. And then we got a couple of cases involving reproductive rights and Obamacare, which are back up in the United States Supreme Court, and First Amendment expression and our education system. Sounds innocuous. The puppy parade. Who doesn't sign me up? I'd be leading the puppy parade, but apparently it's a book that's getting everybody hot and bothered in Maryland, and it's up at the Supreme Court about First Amendment and freedom of religion and freedom of expression. We cover it all. These are just the kind of meaty topics that we take on every week with Dina Sayegh, who's nodding her head over there, sitting in her home office and whatever in California, and Michael Popok sitting in his corner of his office, wherever it may be. And we do it every week. And it's my pleasure and honor to do it with you, Dina. Dina, why don't you, that's the intro, that's the wind up. Here's the pitch. Why don't you dive into what happened with Abrego Garcia, and touch on Senator Van Hollen finally getting to see Abrego Garcia against the backdrop of both governments, El Salvador and U.S., saying, we can't get him out. Well, you got him out for the photo op. And then the fourth, Donald Trump's appeal 2 days ago to the Fourth Circuit for the second time, trying to slap down Judge Zinnis. Every time they try that, she just gets affirmed and reaffirmed. And now we have, 21 judges who have looked at Judge Zinnis's handling of the Abrego Garcia case, know the rule of law and the administration of justice case, and have sided with her. But we got Judge Wilkinson, of all people, who wrote in 7 pages what it would take the average writer hundreds of pages to express. Really a beautifully written and crafted. Literally, I told somebody in our chain on Midas that that opinion is the reason I went. It's the reason I went to law school, that kind of thing. But talk about that, and then what does it mean for the Supreme Court with Donald Trump thumbing his nose again with a social media post that we'll post when you mentioned it about at the White House, obviously, I think written by and posted by Stephen Miller. Why don't you take it from there?
I think this is the most important episode that we've done. And hopefully it will be the last most important episode we've done, but we're at this pivotal crossroads because it's either going to get much worse or we've hit the worst, because we've never really been in this situation where we have clearly now the president defying a Supreme Court order. Before, when we had him trying to defy lower court orders, that was not a constitutional crisis yet, because the Supreme Court could have sided with him. A lot of those cases are still going up to the Supreme Court, frankly, and we've been talking about those with him removing a lot of the board members. But here, the Supreme Court has spoken. It has said that the administration needed to give him due process, and they didn't. And Trump, we've seen it this week over and over again, whether or not it's within that post that you just mentioned, the comments in the Oval Office that he said he's not sending him back. Yeah. So this is no longer some theoretical, what's going to happen? Can it happen that we're at a crossroads like this? We are at that point. And for those of us who are lawyers, who's taken oath to uphold the law, I'm a very optimistic person, and this is so alarming to me, because we truly have a situation now where the president does not want to follow the Constitution. And for those people, I've seen so many comments in the comments about, like, what can the Justice Department do, right? Not the Justice Department, but the justice system, the judiciary. What can they do? Is there nothing they can do? They have teeth, okay? We are just at the beginning of this process. Have faith. The president, as much power as a president has in that position, is not the only powerful figure or entity in our country. So we are at the beginning of a long road, and our judiciary does have some teeth. And so we're going to have to see where they come. But as we talked about last week, the Supreme Court said that Trump has to facilitate the return, and they have not facilitated his return. Senator Van Hollen, as you mentioned, actually met with him, and I was so grateful to see it, because he was alive. Frankly, I thought maybe they couldn't find him in that prison. And after Senator Van Hollen found him, I thought, gosh, like, I was even giving Trump an excuse, right? Thinking, oh, maybe why would you defy a Supreme Court order to this extent over such a basic issue as due process? But it shows how much Trump just how much he wants to be a dictator, frankly. It's not because they couldn't find him or something. He was clearly found. He's clearly healthy. So glad to see it. Due process, again, just to reiterate, it is the core. The reason why it was a 9-0 decision. It's a core principle in the legal system, not just among criminals. If you're in a civil suit and you get sued, you have a certain amount of days, to file your brief. That's called due process. If you get a speeding ticket, you have a court hearing. That's called due process. The judges voted for their jobs. And for this to be the issue that Trump is defying, I can think of no other foundational legal issue, to be honest. And for him to be defying this issue, it's really very scary. And we cannot normalize it, as so much has been normalized around Trump.
No, yeah, I don't mean to interrupt. I agree with you. I think and it's not about whether, as Wilkinson put it yesterday, his opinion for the Fourth Circuit, the government suggests that Armando Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13, perhaps, but perhaps not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to the due process system to make that determination. I was with a group of people yesterday after dinner, and it ran the gamut of political spectrum from right, left, and center. All of us agreed, that this was not about whether he is or is not a wife beater, whether he is or is not a member of MS-13. This is about notice and due process and what he was given. That's what that's what you and I and Legal AF and Midas and our audience is fighting for. Due process, the respect for the rule of law. Here's what Judge Wilkinson said so eloquently yesterday, and then he got his response from Trump, which didn't surprise me, because in one of my hot takes I questioned, well, what are they going to do with Wilkinson? He's not a leftist. He's an icon of the Federalist Society. He's well respected in Republican circles, as he should be. He's a rock rib Republican. He's not an activist. I mean, by God, he wrote a book called The Cosmic Theory of the Constitution, in which he argued against judicial activism and said judges should be humble and have humility when they operate. This is not the guy you can go after. So I said, what are they going to do? They can't say he's a crazy radical leftist, Marxist. So what they did was, F you. Look what we did while your back was turned, Professor, at the chalkboard. We threw like cabbage and tomatoes at you in a pizza. Oh, look, we marked up the New York Times for you. Seriously, here was what Wilkinson said just yesterday, and then we had, of course, the response today from Donald Trump. Um, he said on the bottom. Wait, I'm going to read it. He said at the bottom of page 6 of his decision yesterday, it is, as we have noted, all too possible to see in this case, Armando Abrego Garcia, an incipient crisis, but it may present an opportunity as well. We yet cling to the hope, look, talk about hopium, that it is not naive to believe that our good brethren in the executive branch, he's from a different era, this judge, perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. This case presents their unique chance to vindicate that value and to summon the best that is within us while there is still time. And in response, they put up the middle finger to the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson and said, we're never bringing him back. And this, what Van Hollen just did, he's a fool, Donald Trump said in a social media post. Now we're going to see what the United States Supreme Court is going to do next. What they've allowed him to do, that you and I talked about at length last week, is they've allowed him to get the upper hand by using phony emergencies to create a shadow docket, emergency docket scenario, which means they don't. Here's what it means. It cuts the legs out from under those moderate or right center justices like Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, who during a normal deliberative process following oral argument would be working the hallways of the Supreme Court, exchanging memos and proposed draft opinions through their law clerks to try to coalesce around a coalition of 5 votes and change votes. I've read dozens of books about the inner workings of the brethren of the Supreme Court, and vote changing, and I don't know about trading, but changing happens all the time. Throw that out when you're on a 1 week rocket docket. There is no time for deliberative reflection. There is no time for caucusing. There is no time for working the halls to get votes. Everybody goes to their respective ideological corners instantly. Boom. And Donald Trump can count. He says, if I do it fast and I don't give them time to talk to each other, I got 4 votes, almost guaranteed. Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas. And they got 3 votes. And I know, even as big a dummy as I am, I know 4 is bigger than 3. And I know I only need 1 out of 2. So he's not allowed Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett to try to get votes over to their side, and it is working to his advantage. That's what we've been watching. Mm-hmm. Now that's different than the birthright citizenship. Now we got some time, right? Mm-hmm. Oral argument, not shadow docket on May 15th. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think? I guess the question for you, for the audience is, now that we've framed Abrego Garcia, when it gets off the Fourth Circuit and the now appeal to the United States Supreme Court on an emergency docket. And the issue here, just to remind people, is Zinnis has ordered discovery because she's allowing the other side, the ACLU and others representing Abrego Garcia, to move to amplify their motion for contempt and to gain evidence to show that Trump has done nothing, as the judge declared, done nothing to comply with the orders and commands of the Supreme Court, to facilitate his release from an El Salvadoran jail. Not domestic barrier removal. That's what they said. It's domestic barrier removal. So if there's a prison break, I don't know why I'm doing Ben Meiselas' voice. Yeah. If there's a prison break and he gets out and he wanders into a port like a boat or a plane, we'll let him in and then we'll deport him. That's what they said. And then we'll remove him to someplace not named El Salvador. So that's not what the order says. The
Mm-hmm.
order says he gets here and he's given the due process as if he was here.
Mm-hmm.
Why this is the hill they're dying on. Due process of
Mm-hmm.
all things, is it really is remarkable. Let me take a time out before we switch gears for a second, get your answer. You're
Okay.
on Legal AF, you're on Unprecedented. We'll flip that around on the appropriate screen. Now's the time to subscribe. This is our plate. We're trying to build this channel and get us up to 1 million subscribers before our 1-year anniversary. We just hit 550. We're hitting about 75 to 80,000 subscribers a month. Hit the subscribe button. Take your receipt with you. Listen to Legal AF, the podcast as well, as we try to close the gap between Midas Touch Brothers podcast and ours and leap over a bunch of bro podcast, MAGA, right wing, who knows what podcasts in between. You can help us do that. Hit the subscribe button here on Legal AF. So what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do, Dina?
So before I jump into that real fast, I'm going to piggyback on your subscriber thing because, I was saying how am truly alarmed now, and it takes a lot to shake me. And we had on this episode the last 2 weekends, like over 100,000 views. And if you think about that, the size of that rally, right? The size of that rally, if we all were in a picture, would be so powerful. And we are the majority. And we cannot forget that. As much as Trump and MAGA and Stephen Miller and all of them want to pretend that they can destroy this country and nobody will stop them, they are wrong. We are the majority. It's why AOC and Bernie Sanders are going viral. It's why people care about the Supreme Court and are joining us. So yeah, I think the subscribing, the watching, the sharing these videos, the talking to friends is so warms my heart and makes me feel like we do have a shot here because we are the majority and we have the bigger numbers. And sometimes it doesn't feel like that when we don't have technically the power of the Congress or the president, but we have the numbers. So anyway, in terms of the Supreme Court, just to also go back when you were talking about the discussion of whether or not he's an MI-13, Fox News, the fact that they are amplifying one thing, honestly, when he comes back, I think he should file a defamation claim because he has been defamed all over the place. And secondly, when we as Democrats go into the weeds of his character and whether or not he is a gang member or he's not because the tattoos are not and blah, 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 I just think that we are then just engaging in their conversation. And we cannot let them set the conversation because it does not matter whether or not he's a gang member or any of the stuff they want to say about him, because the fact is they've admitted they made a mistake. The conversation needs to begin and end with that and go no further. He has a right to due process, period, regardless of his character. That is the rule of law in the United States. In terms of what the Supreme Court is going to do, they were very clear in their initial order that the district court judge, by facilitating, could request that the government tell them what steps they are undertaking to bring back his return. Clearly, that is what the government is trying to block here. The Supreme Court could just not take it up because the the Court of Appeals, as you said, just wrote the most amazing opinion, and it's clearly within the Supreme Court order. So the question really is, how much does the Supreme Court want to reprimand Trump for the comments he's made about defying his order? That is the only reason why the Supreme Court will take it up, because in terms of needing to clarify the law, which is really the reason why the Supreme Court needs to bring it up, I think there is no confusion. It's a very clear order. The other thing is, if people are asking why do so many people in the country still support Trump? He's defying the Supreme Court. So many of them don't care. It's because he keeps lying about it. I don't think so many Americans don't care that he's defying the Supreme Court. I think so many Americans don't know he's defying the Supreme Court. because he's obviously misconstrued the 9-0 opinion. And then his talking heads, Fox News, the echo chamber, and the right continue it. So Fox News, I think they need another defamation lawsuit. They need to stop lying for Trump. The big lie, this might be the second big lie, lying about a really crucial, important Supreme Court order.
So, all right, now with that, let's move on to the United States Supreme Court, since we've been speaking at length about it, about what they're going to do since they've decided to take up, there's about 4 or 5 different birthright, citizenship, in nationwide injunctions. Of course, it has to be nationwide injunctions. I mean, how else would you do birthright citizenship? You 6 states, you were born here because there's no injunction, so you're a citizen. But you 12 states, you don't have the, I mean, there's just certain things that have to be universal injunction or global injunction wise. So it's very interesting that they've chosen this case to pull up on the 15th of May at 10 a.m. There's a plug for the live stream here on Legal AF. And I just talked to Dina before we started the show, and it's either her or me, but it's probably going to be more her. She's going to do an opener, a little pregame show, have the live stream, a little postgame show for really all of the live streams of oral arguments in federal court that are available to us. This is going to be your home for that and the commentary around that. So how do we get here? First injunction issued against the Trump administration on the 5th day of its administration by Judge Coffenor in San Francisco was birthright citizenship, overturning and finding invalid under the Constitution, under the 14th Amendment, which says what it says. If you're born here and subject to the jurisdiction of the territory of the United States, you are a citizen. It is if your little baby butt or foot hit the ground, or coming out of your mom, and your mom is in the United States, you are on a U.S. military base, you are an American citizen. Some countries don't do it that way, but we do. Mexico does, Canada does. That's the way we do it. And Donald Trump decided he was going to change the Constitution by way of an executive order. First of all, executive orders are barely law until they're confirmed through a federal court process. They're not law. Executives they faithfully execute the law. They don't create law. All these 60, 80 executive orders, they are about as weak a assertion of power as possible. And that's not my words. That's the United States Supreme Court. So and you can't amend the Constitution by way of an executive order. Now, what he's trying to do is say, it's been interpreted for over 100 years wrong. Only I have interpreted it right. See, even the Supreme Court got it wrong in 1898. When they ruled that Chinese citizen, when he went to China and tried to come back in, whoa, stop them at the border. You don't get to come back in because I was born here. Oh, no, that's not how we read the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court shut that down once and for all. Their little wiggle room as they try to contort and extort and contort the language of the Constitution. They're saying, oh, they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States because they're here illegally, or their mother is not a citizen, or their father is not a citizen. That's not what it says. That's not how it's been interpreted. Judge Coffenor enters the injunction nationwide. 3 or 4 other judges in Maryland, New Jersey, Massachusetts do the exact same thing. And it's been that way. So all these people that have been born to date have been American citizens. All these pregnant mothers worried. Now, Donald Trump calls them anchor babies. Donald Trump calls it, birth tourism. All ways to undermine, dehumanize babies and mothers and others. So the Supreme Court's taken it up, and they're extending their term, effectively, oral argument term anyway, to do it. What's your read about it? Give us your read on it.
It's not great because usually the Supreme Court will take up a conflict among the circuits. If the First Circuit rules one way, the Fourth Circuit's a little bit different, then the Supreme Court needs to step in and resolve the conflict. But the fact is, all the circuits ruled exactly the same, and it was consistent with their prior precedent. So technically, they should do nothing. The fact that they're taking it up, as we've talked about, it means there's 4 who probably want to change it. That doesn't mean it will get changed because you need a majority. But even them taking it up at all, let's say we do have a 5-4 split and there is no change to the Constitution. You're going to have a dissent that is going to have some opinion that the next person who tries to bring it up is going to rely on. And it starts to be, you start to chip away at the precedent of of their prior decision, Kim Wong Ark. So I don't love that they're taking it up. The issue of the nationwide injunctions they're also taking up, which in January they were asked to take up and they declined. Again, they probably have the 4 people. I don't see them getting rid of nationwide injunctions. To your point right there, the chaos that it would cause having a federal law applied differently among states, the due process claims, I think, that all the different residents would have against that. I think it would create a lot more legal issues going their way, which I don't think the Supreme Court ever wants to do that. But here's the thing. So the Supreme Court is always a long game. They don't see themselves as, again, Chief Justice Roberts didn't like Dobbs, not because it was changing precedent, but it was changing it too quickly. They believe in incremental change. They are willing to have patience that maybe you're going to change that precedent, maybe not during your lifetime or between 20, 30 years of your lifetime. So I can see there being some sort of incremental change to birthright citizenship, and that's bad. So this is a tough one, because the other thing too is the Supreme Court, by taking this up, knows that they are getting themselves into the ring again with Trump. And if they were taking it up only to reaffirm birthright citizenship, I think they would have avoided that conflict, because they don't really want to be in conflict so many times with the president. There is a conservative, and I don't mean conservative in terms of like Republican, but there's a conservative judicial way of being, which is do as little as possible. And so why take up a case that you're going to issue against the president that he's already defying your other order? So to me, it's because there's enough who want to give him at least partially what he wants, and whether or not they can get the 5th member on board, I think, is the only question.
Yeah, we're going to have to watch that closely. Come here on Legal AF, May 15th, 10 a.m. for our live stream and commentary around that particular issue. I can't think of a issue more important about the role of executive power, executive orders, the Constitution, nationwide injunctions, all wrapped into one case. And I agree with you that it's not, although we've been fooled before. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic they won't do it based on the precedent, but let's see what happens now that they have the numbers. Why don't you round out the show with the 2 cases that you find interesting, and therefore our audience will, about reproductive rights and the ACA and Maryland and the puppy parade. Sounds like something I would, puppy bowl. Or to tell our audience all about it.
So the Supreme Court was kind of off this past week in terms of oral argument, but they're coming back, and we got some big ones here at the end of April. Next week alone, there's 2 that we're watching, and just to give a preview that will summarize how it went next week, but for anybody who wants to kind of watch along and know a little bit what's happening. On Monday, there's the one regarding the Affordable Care Act Preventative Task Force. And a religious conservative group sued them, wanting to dismantle the task force because they didn't like that they were providing preventative HIV care, or recommending it underneath, or I guess covering it basically underneath the ACA, because they said, quote, it promotes homosexuality. I mean, this is where we're at in 2025. So the preventative task force, of course, not only covers things like HIV, but they also cover contraception, cancer screenings, statin medications, HPV vaccines. I mean, we're talking about preventing really serious disease and illness, and this group wanting to dismantle it. And the question is very similar to the idea of the other disputes around the executive power and Congress, because Here, and this is why Monday will be important, because it's going to also give us a glimmer into how the Supreme Court might handle Trump trying to fire members of the board. Because here, the argument by the conservative Christian group is that the members of the task force aren't inferior or officers, as the administration says, but that they are principal officers and as such need to be confirmed by Congress. But the Biden administration was the one who initially was defending this case. The Trump administration is now defending this case because, now they control it, and so they want to keep controlling it, essentially. But their point is that the Secretary of Health and Human Services can fire the members of the task force at will, and so they're inferior officers and not principal officers, and so they should be allowed to remain as a task force. So this will be our first chance to hear the Supreme Court beliefs on this whole idea of inferior and principal officers, which is coming in all the time with the Trump-related cases, and specifically also with Elon Musk and Doge, because as we know, he's never been appointed to anything. So that's on Monday. And then on Tuesday is the one with the Puppy Pride Parade. It's in Maryland. Maryland's got a lot going on right now. Know what's happening there. So in Maryland, a part of the elementary school curriculum was this Puppy Pride book, which had a puppy kind of running around an LGBTQ parade. And a group of parents,
sounds adorable.
I know, it sounds adorable.
All right.
Probably the cutest book. Anything with a puppy is usually adorable. And a group of parents coming together, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, said, we needed to have been notified and opted out of this book. And because we didn't have that, this is a violation of our freedom of exercise of religion. And we've talked about how the Supreme Court has got three religious cases that are very big this year. This is one. The other one is having to do with whether or not Oklahoma has to fund a Catholic charter school. Yes, you heard that right. That's coming at the end of April. So oral arguments for the Puppy Pride Parade is Tuesday. It's going to give us a glimmer. And just to reiterate, the Constitution, as to do with religion, there's two very important parts of it. One is that the government cannot establish a religion. And the second one is the government can't interfere with your exercise of religion. And it's the establishment of religion clause is really the one, let's say, that those of us who don't want other people's religions imposed on us come up. But if you notice, the ones that the Supreme Court has taken with the Oklahoma, with Maryland, with the one regarding the retirement services, the employment case that we talked about the other day, all have to do with freedom of exercise of religion. And when you almost hear even that claim, are they going after freedom to exercise their religion? It's going to be somebody who's trying to impose religion or like interfere with it. And when you hear somebody trying to claim that an action is an establishment of religion, that tends to be the more Democrat liberal claim. So all the Supreme Court claims right now have to do with freedom of exercise of religion, which is usually the claims brought by religious groups.
So we'll have the oral arguments. In fact, I'll work with Dina to make sure we get all these oral arguments that are available to the public up on our live. We have a new live tab on our Legal AF landing page for this YouTube channel. You'll see the one we just did yesterday about the Associated Press with the Gulf of America on trial, if you will. And we'll add to that the library of all these other oral arguments. And in fact, Dina, you'll work with me offline to help curate that?
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah. I don't know if I can do those two live,
right. Okay.
But I will love to provide summaries for sure.
All right. So we'll figure out on the schedule when the courts of appeal that are federal and the Supreme Court federal. State courts don't usually do it, although some states even televise. It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
But we're really now in the heart of the matter with federal courts, and that's where we need to be. That's where you are here on Legal AF on another edition of Unprecedented. Dina, Sayegh, Dahl, Michael Popok. Take a moment and hit the free subscribe button and help us continue our march to 1 million subscribers here on the channel. It's that important, as we are all now the foot soldiers to protect our Constitution. Till our next report, it's Michael and Dina. signing off. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.